Well, hello, everybody. It's Lauren Alia and it's Holly, and we are back with Breakthrough to Best Self, your favorite podcast, or we hope soon. Anyway, we're sort of doing an expansion from the conversation that we had in our last podcast, which was about creating the life we love. And as Lauren and I spoke, we sort of realized that there are so many facets to this. Last time we spoke, we gave you 5 ideas. But today we're going to dive into something else. And I just want to give a shout out to Lauren, who is showing up on our podcast remote. Where are
hmm
you today, Lauren?
Yes, hi guys. So I'm usually in Durban, South Africa. I'm still in South Africa, but I am in Johannesburg. So um, if my sound sounds a little different in this podcast, I'm not in my normal recording surroundings. But listen, the show must go on. And the good thing about doing things digitally is that we can work remote, and we didn't want to delay at the next episode until I get back. So yeah, coming to you from Johannesburg this time. And as Holly says, we really thought it was important to continue the discussion that we started in the last episode, where we talked about, um, 5 ideas on how, we create a life that we love. And as we expanded on that conversation just amongst ourselves and talking to others and speaking to people who'd watched the last episode, and for those who haven't watched it, please go back and watch the last video on this playlist. We covered gratitude, authenticity, living it to you, and finding your true self, and living according to your true, purpose or goals. Self acceptance was the third. Self acceptance we coupled with self love for those who wanted to go a bit broader. Number four was presence, and that was about really being present in the moment, living your life, being anchored in the present. And number five, the fifth idea we shared was around nurturing relationships, both being in relationships that are nurturing, and then of course nurturing the relationships that you're in. And those were 5 ideas on how to create a life you love. And in this episode, we want to go beyond the kind of feel good stuff. And this is the conversation, Holly. Sometimes when we are in the process of creating a life that we love, building a life that we love, we come across aspects of our existing life, people, relationships, situations, jobs, our own behaviors, things that don't align to this life that we're creating, the life that is true to ourselves. And so that's really what we want to talk about today. Holly, just initial thoughts when you think about the process, your own process of creating a life that you love, and all the work that's gone into and continues to go into building that life. Do you come across, and have you come across aspects of your existing life where um, you just notice there's a misalignment? And before we get into the specifics of how you might have made those changes, let's talk a little bit about what that feels like. How do you know?
Mm,
How do you
right.
know when something, an aspect of your existing life, is not aligned to the life that you're aspiring to, the life that you're building? How do you know when it's not
Mm,
aligned?
that's a great question. If you think about it, it can show up in many different ways. It can be a physical sensation in your body. Like for myself, I have had that tightness in my chest or in my stomach or on, my neck, my shoulders, they get tight. They get tense. I get very tense. And then I have to actually ask myself. And I didn't always feel those sensations in early on because I was disconnected from my body a lot. So that's another episode. But once I was more in touch with my body, I could feel those sensations and say something's not right here. So it could be physical. It could be mental. It could show up as I'm not good enough, or judgment of myself. Oh, there you go, Holly, doing this again or doing that again, or limiting belief like, oh, if I can't think of an example. If I do this, then I will never do that or always do this. When the word always and never shows up in my inner dialogue, it is a flag for me to say, Hold on, something's going on here." But that also was work for me to get there. And, last week, in our episode last week, we were talking about self awareness, self acceptance, and self love. And I think for me, it was getting to those places before I had the ability to slow down the negative voice in my head and start to question it. That was my experience. Some people, they question it, they can question their beliefs immediately.
Yeah. And we're talking about beliefs that
So,
are not aligned, right? So in this case, you're talking specifically around beliefs that don't align. So let's go a little bit broader then to whether it's, relationships or situations that you're um, in your pursuit of the life you love, in this building of a relationship of self-acceptance and self-love. How do you know when something's on your path or in your world, in your environment, that's not aligned to where you're going? How do you know that? So, and you may have some examples of situations, and maybe that's an easier way to explain. When you're on your
yeah.
path and you are building this life, and you have an aspect of your life that's not aligned, how do you know it's not aligned? And I think that is the question. And I hear you. You're saying that in some situations, it's just a feeling that you get, physically. It's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this. And it allows you to start looking at the way that something's affecting you physically. You mentioned that mentally, sometimes your own limiting beliefs. And I'm assuming in that case, those beliefs are not aligned themselves. Um,
100%.
but let's talk outside of yourself. So
My
situations that
life. Okay.
in
Let's
in
go
your
there.
life, when things in your life, present in your life, relationships, jobs, people, um,
100%.
when you know they're not aligned, what does that look like? How do you know it's not aligned? I think that's the
How do I
starting point
know?
for a lot of people. I'll share just now how I know things are not aligned, but I want to hear from you. How do you know things are not aligned?
Okay, certainly. I had something really big happen to me as I was walking down this self-discovery path. I realized, well, you and I have often shared that we met in our training, in the FARA training. That's for those of you who haven't heard, it's Food Addiction Recovery Advocates. We also have certifications in other aspects, but that's where we met. And that's where it showed up the loudest for me. That gave me the knowledge that, oh, sometimes we've got to break things down to build them back up. And so, for me, I have a food addiction that I am in recovery from, and have my my line of work. I owned my own catering company for 23 years. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense to me now why a food addict would surround themselves with food 24 hours a day. Oh, but anyway, I digress. Um, when I started to become, get into recovery and realize that being around these types of food, and even worse for me, serving these foods to other people on one hand, and talking to other people on the other hand about recovering from this. Those two just slammed up against each other, and I could no longer go on that way. Here's the thing. I can't just walk away from a 20 something year old business. And so it was a slow and methodical way of breaking down my old life and creating my new life kind of at the same time. And it wasn't always pleasant and it wasn't always fun, but it was necessary. So that's
Mhm.
I guess, the example, the biggest example I have of how that showed up for me.
Right. So as you continue to grow in your own skills and understanding around food addiction recovery, um, running a company that served those very foods to people, there was this misalignment. So
Yes.
just the knowing that, just on a at face value almost initially, that these two things just don't align. Earlier on you were saying some of that awareness is purely mental, and in the mental aspect it's just logic sometimes that this is not aligned to that. So sometimes it's not even like this inner intuitive feeling. Sometimes it's just on the surface of things. It's like, I no longer do this. I now understand the harmful effect that these foods have. How can I, in good conscience, just logically, these
Right.
things don't align? But then deeper, Holly, you said it didn't fit that. How could you continue to serve these foods, knowing what they do? And I think that's that's where I guess I enter sometimes into knowing that something's not in alignment with my true self or with the life that a life that I'm building. Often it's things that don't align to my core values, because as I continue to explore who I am, and following from last week's episode, accept and love who I am.
Right.
And then, one of those ideas of building a life we love was about authenticity. So as I continue to be authentic and show up as my true self, and then accept and love my true self, I've noticed that that is where spotlight starts to just shine on things that don't align. And often it's around values. It's like, here's something that's a core value for me, but here's either this relationship or this person or this job or this behavior that's not aligned to what I now value. And so often that's a starting point for me of saying, this is not in alignment. And you've given a great example of the process of cutting ties
Yeah.
with something that's not in
It's
alignment.
hard to cut ties when you're wrapped up, when the ties are wrapped all around you.
Right. So sometimes cutting ties is not a one step.
Mm.
I'm just, oh, this
Yeah.
thing shows up, and I don't like what this looks like or feels like, and so I'm done. I'm just going to cut ties and cut and run. And so sometimes it's a process of planning, and that can be painful when we're straddling
Oh, yeah.
two worlds, right? In your case, it was your career. It
It
was
was very
your
difficult.
career, your means of income. For other people, it may be relationships that you're in where
Sure.
you know that this relationship is not serving me in my quest for, true
Right.
self, or building a life that I love, or um, living to my true potential and purpose. But it's not always easy to extricate yourself from a relationship, especially when there's codependency or enmeshment in some way. So the process of planning, and it's in that in between state where I don't, I shouldn't be here. This is not aligned to who I am, but I can't leave right now. That's where there's a lot of kind of pain in that situation, right?
Right.
So, and then there's other situations where cutting ties is necessary as an immediate step, right? Do you have
Absolutely.
some examples, Holly, of where perhaps there's just no question about, here's something that I absolutely need to separate from now?
Typically, it's more of an acute, it's happening right now in the moment. You and I spoke about the scarf on fire scenario and it's more like other people's behavior. And look, I am no saint. My friends and family who knew me like long ago before I got into recovery, I think sometimes are like, "Really, Holly?" But yeah, I've grown. But there are moments where it is just of the utmost importance that we remove ourselves from the situation. Um, and first of all, I want to say if there's ever a situation where there's a threat of physical, remove from that scenario immediately.
Physical harm, you mean?
That's Go
Physical
ahead. Go
harm.
ahead.
Huh? Yeah, no, I was just clarifying when you say physical, you mean where there's a situation of physical risk, physical harm risk.
Correct. So that's
Mm-hmm.
an immediate cutting away, one way or another, just removing from that scenario. And that could be just in this moment. It could also be in the moment. Let's say you have a conflict with someone at work, and it could be an ongoing scenario where you're looking at cutting ties and finding a way that I only speak to you when I need to. Because you and I both know, we've talked about this many times, that triggers can lead us to all sorts of behavior that we would prefer not to have happen. In the life that we are creating for ourselves, we are learning what our triggers are and we are managing them. So it could be something that happens that's an ongoing, or something that happens that is an immediate. What do you do in that scenario, Lauren? If you've got an ongoing situation, it could be work, it could be family, it could be anything, and you need to cut ties, but you can't necessarily cut ties in that moment, then what do you do to build that life that you love?
Make a plan. Make a plan. This is something that I've really learned to value um, in my own self development, self discovery journey, certainly in my recovery, uh, personal recovery journey. And is a big part of what I do with clients that I'm working with, in the field of transformational self development. Have a plan. Because here's the thing, what we know is that the brain loves a plan. We know
Yes.
that when we are in a stress situation, um, feeling stuck or having self judgment about your role in the situation only makes it worse. So feeling stuck, feeling like there's nothing I can do about this, feeling like there's no way out, blaming myself that I'm not taking action when I know better, I see better. All of that continues to add to the stress and the pain of the situation you're in.
Yes.
When you begin to plan, if nothing else changes, but you begin to plan, there's a feedback loop that happens to your own mind that lowers the stress level, that says, you're doing the best you can, you're taking steps. So nothing has changed, but I'm aware of the problem and I'm starting to formulate a plan. Now, the plan may not necessarily be all of the exact SMART goal type of planning of, what is the specific thing I'm going to do, by when, and how much is it going to cost. And it doesn't even need to be a detailed plan. Sometimes just being really aware and setting an intention that says, this is no longer working for me. I want to stop this situation and I'm going to work on a plan. And that plan could be starting to explore resources outside of yourself. Um,
Yes.
Google searches, for goodness sake, could be a resource
Yeah.
as an example of how do what do you do with limited funds if you wanted to change your job? That's an
Right.
example.
Right.
Or speaking to a friend that you trust, speaking to a person
That
that
is taking
you
action.
rely.
That is taking action.
Yeah, or that will just be a sounding board sometimes. So sometimes it's just, again, choose wisely who you talk to. If you don't have anybody personally in your life you can talk to as their professional, that would be a sounding board that says, I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck, but it no longer serves me. It's not aligned. And start to formulate a plan. So for me, if you've got a situation that requires a longer term cutting of the ties
Yes.
in your planning today. The moment you go, this is not aligned to where I want to be in my life, to the life I'm building, to my purpose, or to my true self, begin to plan. And so that's the first thing I would do with like long term or longer terms. And you know what's interesting, and it has been for me, is that setting that intention and putting it out there, and some of you might be familiar and be in agreement with the law of attraction. Um, Others may simply call it, putting out a wish. Somebody else may be putting out a prayer. But there's something about putting out what you would like to change that invites
So true.
opportunities for change to happen.
I
It
actually,
invites,
I so resonate with you on that, Lauren. And if you believe in the law of attraction, which I do, one of the things that I practice when I am trying to make a large change like this that takes time, I I live in the experience of this has already happened. Oh, I'm so happy that that this has changed. It's wonderful. It may not even be there yet, and that's okay. That's okay. Because if even if you don't believe in the law of attraction, that is a comfort to our being of just being happy that this is already happening. This is already
yeah.
falling into place.
Mhm. Yeah, so that process, alignment could start with setting an intention that I want something to change, um, putting it out there, and again, I'm going to say for people of faith, it could be a prayer that says, I am in a situation that I really want to be different, but I'm not able to change it right now. Help me. So
Yes.
there's something about just putting out that intention of for change that invites opportunity, and you start to notice opportunities that align with the change that you're wanting to create. So whether it's a person that shows up, information that comes into your awareness, resources that come, just suddenly having this idea of how you could make things different. So definitely, with a longer term cutting of ties. I want to go back, Holly, to immediate cutting of ties.
Mm.
You mentioned situations where potentially there's physical risk, harm, certainly. Um, and there's been some cases, again, where even just this misalignment with values requires some immediate changes.
Yeah.
It may be places that you used to go
Mm.
that don't go anymore, and it's immediate. It's like I used to go to certain places, and I think about changes I've made in my own development, my own growth, transformation. It required for me to go, those places don't align with the person that I'm becoming and the person I hope to be, and I'm just not going to go there anymore. And that was immediate for me. I stopped going to places that just weren't, just the energy and the environment of the place was not conducive to the life that I
Yeah.
was living for myself, which is, in my case, a faith aligned life. And there were some things that just totally contradicted my faith beliefs. And so I was like, not going to go there anymore. There were certain behaviors that I needed, I wanted to change and made those changes immediate. Um, and there were things that needed longer term. I mean, I have a career change that you're aware of.
Yeah.
I spent almost 3 decades in communication, public relations, marketing environment, and worked on both ends of the spectrum, both as sort of an executive client that was driving communication and marketing, as well as being in the advertising industry for a long time. And my journey into the holistic wellness space began with my own personal recovery and weight loss journey, which broadened into, this holistic health journey, which has broadened into food addiction recovery, and then broadened
Right.
into understanding the unconscious mind and my training in neuro-linguistic programming. And so at some point in this journey of my own development, I got to a place where I realized that the job I was in, my quintessential 9 to 5, the way that I was earning my money was not aligned to this holistic wellness life that I wanted, not only for myself, but the one that I was hoping to help others with. Um, and at some point, I needed to make a plan. I needed to make a plan of how was I going to transition so that my job, my 9 to 5, was actually aligned to holistic wellness, which is true to me and my values. And a couple of years ago, being able to totally step away from
Yeah.
the advertising agency world. So it shows up in different ways. There's certainly relationships I've had to um, cut ties with. No judgment on the other person, but certainly understanding that
That alignment thing again.
listen up. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is an interesting topic. Holly, anything else you want to talk about in before we go, just on this aspect of building a life that we love, which is, what we started in the last episode, but really looking at this, what I would say is a bold move that
Yeah.
sometimes we need to, because it takes some courage, right? It takes some courage. It takes skills on how to set boundaries, how to detach,
Hmm.
and how to lean in to who we are and trust ourselves, trust the universe, trust your higher power, um, that cutting ties with whatever it is that's not serving you is for your greater good. Anything else you want to say in closing as we think about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. I'm thinking about for our greater good when you said that. And sometimes when we're in the middle of cutting ties, it's painful and it's hard to feel this is for my greater good sometimes in the middle of it. And every thinking about it, writing about it, watching a podcast about it, maybe having a difficult conversation or setting a boundary, all these different things that you are doing, you're already building. Maybe you're tearing down a little bit some of the old stuff, some of that old scaffolding that didn't fit for you or doesn't fit now. No judgment on our past selves because our past selves got us to where we are today. But we've got places to go, my friends. We've got things to do. And it's okay if you find that something is not in alignment with who you are becoming to examine it. Just examine it. And then maybe make a plan, as Lauren said, to move forward. In your time, your pace. That's what I got for you today.
Thanks, Holly. That's an awesome ending. I'm not going to add anything to what you've said, except to ask that if anybody watching this video, wherever you come across it, if this is content that you enjoy, if the topics that Holly and I are discussing resonate with you, or at least get you thinking about your life differently, do think about subscribing to our channel, Breakthrough to Best Self on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and hit the notifications bell so that you are aware when we upload the next episode. We thank you as always for watching this video through to the end. We appreciate your support on the channel and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, Holly.
See you next time, friends.